Chapter 1. The clean break. Sean Grant quit his job on a Tuesday, which felt appropriate. Mondays were for dread, Fridays for denial. Tuesday was honest. He did it standing up. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and burned coffee, the scent of productivity theater. 12 people sat around the table, all staring at him with varying degrees of concern, irritation, and polite disbelief. The quarterly review deck glowed behind him, 72 slides of optimized despair. "I'm done," Sean said. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't slammed anything. He simply said it the way one might state the weather or a diagnosis. His manager blinked. "Done with? This?" Sean said, gesturing broadly. "All of it." Someone laughed, uncertain. Another person checked their phone, already disengaging. Sean felt a surprising calm spread through him, as if his nervous system had finally unclenched after years of being braced for impact. "You can't just quit in the middle of," his manager began. "I can," Sean said. "And I am." There were questions, offers, a brief, frantic attempt at negotiation that included the words retention bonus and career trajectory. Sean listened politely, thanked them sincerely, and declined everything. He shook hands with people he liked, nodded at people he didn't, and packed his desk into a single cardboard box that had once held printer paper. His friends, if they could be called that, met him for drinks that night. They hugged him too tightly, asked if he was okay, told him he was brave in the tone usually reserved for people who had joined cults or quit sugar cold turkey. "You'll be back," one of them said, smiling like it was a kindness. Sean smiled back and thought, absolutely not. 3 days later, he pointed his car south and drove until the buildings softened, the air thickened, and the sky widened into something forgiving. Florida greeted him the way it always had, loudly. The heat wrapped around him the moment he stepped out of the car, humid and unapologetic. The palm trees looked exactly as he remembered, lazy, defiant, completely unconcerned with productivity metrics. His parents' house smelled like lemon cleaner and something frying. The front door was open, the screen door half closed, rattling slightly in the breeze. "Sean?" his mother called from somewhere near the kitchen. "Is that you?" "Yes," Sean said, setting down his bag. "Did you eat?" his father asked from the living room. "I just got here." "You look thin," his mother said, appearing with a spatula. "Are you sleeping?" His father stood up. "I told you he works too much." "I heard that," his mother said, turning back toward the stove. "Sean, did you want chicken or fish?" Because the chicken's been out longer. The fish is frozen," his father added helpfully. Sean opened his mouth, closed it, recalibrated, and answered both conversations at once. "Fish is fine, and yes, I'm sleeping now." Neither parent noticed the conversational gymnastics. They rarely did. They had been married for over 35 years, long enough that Sean suspected they operated on separate auditory tracks. He had learned, as a child, how to nod in 2 rhythms, how to respond with precision to overlapping sentences, how to exist in stereo without losing the plot. Dinner passed like that. Overlapping stories, half-questions, parallel monologues. Sean felt oddly comforted. It was chaotic, but it was familiar chaos. No one asked him for deliverables. Later that evening, he drove to the beach. Aunt Tessa's club glowed like a promise. Tiki torches lined the sand, their flames dancing against the darkening sky. Steel drums pulsed through the warm air, the music loose and joyful and just slightly out of sync, like life was meant to be. The dining area stretched out toward the water, tables scattered close enough to hear the waves break. Tessa stood at the edge of it all, barefoot, clipboard tucked under her arm, hair pulled back in a messy, not that meant business. She spotted him and broke into a grin that reached her eyes. "Well, look what the tide dragged in." Sean smiled, something in his chest loosening. "Hey, Tessa." She pulled him into a hug that smelled like sunscreen and citrus. "You look exhausted." "Thank you." "Come walk with me," she said, already turning. "Tell me everything." They moved through the space easily. Staff nodded to her, waved to Sean. Tessa greeted everyone by name. She corrected a table setting, adjusted a torch, intercepted a server mid-panic with calm efficiency. "I heard you quit," she said. Explosively, apparently. She laughed. "Good. It suits you." They reached the edge of the deck, the ocean stretching out before them, endless and dark and alive. "I'm glad you're here," Tessa said, softer now. "I could use the help." "I know," Sean said. "That's why I came." She studied him. "That's not the only reason." "No," he admitted. "But it's a good one." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, listening to the drums, the surf, the low murmur of conversation drifting across the sand. "You're not your job," Tessa said finally. Sean swallowed. "I'm trying to remember that." She bumped his shoulder. "Good. Because if you try to turn this place into a corporate hellscape, I will personally throw you into the ocean." He laughed genuinely. "Fair." As the night unfolded, Sean felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Not certainty, but possibility. Chapter 2. Welcome to the Sand Trap. Sean learned 3 things in his first hour at the club. First, nothing that involved sand ever stayed where you put it. Second, The music never really stopped. Even when the steel drums did, something else picked up the rhythm. Waves, voices, the thud of feet on wooden decking, the hum of generators that sounded like they were barely holding on out of spite. Third, everyone already had an opinion about him. He stood behind the main bar with a laminated floor plan in his hand, trying to orient himself while not looking like the kind of person who used words like orientation unironically. The bar curved in a loose crescent, designed to funnel people inward, toward the ocean, toward the illusion that this was all effortless. It was not. Don't just stand there like an unplugged lamp. The voice came from his left. Female, dry, sharpened by experience. Sean turned. She was already working, sliding a drink down the bar without looking at the customer, who caught it with the reflexes of someone who had done this dance before. Her dark hair was pulled into a high ponytail that swung every time she moved. She wore black shorts, a loose tank with the club's logo, and an expression that suggested she had no patience for nonsense and less for excuses. Sean began. New, she finished. Obviously. I'm helping out, he said. Sean. Lena, she said, still not looking at him. And unless you want to help by getting out of the way, you might want to grab a towel and start wiping down that end. She nodded toward a section of bar already gleaming. Sean glanced at his pristine polo shirt, then back at her. Right, towel. He found one, damp and faintly citrus-scented, and began wiping. He tried to mirror her efficiency, but his movements were too careful, too deliberate. He could feel her noticing without looking. You worked corporate, she said. Sean blinked. Is it that obvious? You're wiping like the bar might file a complaint. He snorted before he could stop himself. Fair. She finally looked at him then, quick and assessing. You here for the summer? Indefinitely. Her eyebrow twitched upward. That's a long way of saying you don't know. That's accurate. She returned to her work. You related to Tessa? Nephew. Ah, Lena said. That explains the confidence. Sean frowned. I'm not confident. You are, she said. You're just not loud about it. He considered that while wiping. The bar was already spotless. He kept going anyway. The lunch crowd trickled in slowly, sunburned tourists and locals who nodded at each other with easy familiarity. Lena moved like she'd memorized the space down to the inch. Sean tried to anticipate needs. Ice, garnishes, glassware. But every time he reached for something, someone else had already handled it. At one point, he tried to reorganize the stack of menus by size. Lena stopped mid-pour. Don't. He froze. Don't? Rearrange, she said. We know where things are. I just thought. I'm sure you did. The edge in her voice wasn't cruel, exactly. Just firm. A line drawn in sand, which felt appropriate. Sean stepped back. Okay. She studied him for a beat, then sighed. Look, it's not personal. We get a lot of helpers. They usually help for about a week and then disappear. I'm not disappearing. We'll see. The afternoon wore on. Sean fetched supplies, ran food, learned the difference between drinks that sounded identical but absolutely were not. He got sand in his shoes, sweat on his collar, and a blister on his right hand from carrying trays like a man who had only ever carried laptops. Somewhere between a spilled margarita and a near collision with a server named Mike, Sean realized he was smiling. Not the polite, strategic smile he used in meetings, a real one. By sunset, the club transformed. Torches were lit. The air cooled just enough to feel intentional. Music shifted, slower and deeper, inviting people to linger. Sean leaned against the bar, watching the place breathe. You're still here, Lena said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of water. She handed him one. Should I not be? Most people would have faked a call by now. He took the glass. I'm trying not to fake things anymore. She studied him again, longer this time. That'll either work out great or terribly. Story of my life. She laughed at that, a quick sound that surprised both of them. She looked away first. So, she said, what exactly are you helping with? Sean hesitated. I was thinking about operations, streamlining, maybe expanding events, optimizing. Careful, Lena said. That's 3 buzzwords in a row. He winced. Sorry. Habit. She leaned back against the bar. This place runs on people. You streamline too hard, you break it. I know, he said quickly. I think I do. I don't want to change the soul. Just support it. Her expression softened. Just a fraction. We'll see. A group at the far end waved her over. She pushed off the bar and paused. You did okay today. High praise. Don't get used to it. She walked away. Sean watched her go, then looked out at the ocean. The waves rolled in, steady and unbothered. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was racing them. He felt like he might finally be learning the rhythm. Chapter 3 Metrics versus Magic. By the 3rd day, Sean could tell the difference between a rush and a rush. A rush was manageable. Loud, busy, full of movement but contained by muscle memory and trust. A rush was what happened when something went wrong. When ice ran out at the wrong moment, when a table order went missing, when the rhythm hiccuped and threatened to collapse into noise. Tonight had the bones of a rush. Sean stood near the host stand with a legal pad tucked under his arm, watching the flow of people like it might reveal its secrets if he stared long enough. Sunset-themed night, locals' favorite. Live steel drums, rotating drink specials, a menu trimmed down for speed. In theory, it was a perfect system. In practice, the kitchen was already backed up. "Tessa," Sean said, catching his aunt as she passed. "Can I show you something?" She glanced at the pad. "If this involves arrows, make it quick." "It's just an idea," he said. "If we reroute food runners to loop clockwise instead of crossing back through the bar, we cut collision points by..." "Sean," she said gently. "This place has been running clockwise and counterclockwise since before you could spell either one." "But..." "Talk to Lena," Tessa said, already moving away. "She'll tell you if it's stupid." Sean winced but took the advice. He found Lena behind the bar, 3 drinks deep into a complex order, her movements sharp and efficient. He waited until she finished before speaking. "Hey," he said. "Quick question. Define quick." He held up the pad. "I think we can reduce congestion if we change runner paths during peak windows." She stared at him. "You've been here 3 days." "I know," he said. "But I've been watching." "So have we," she said. "For years." "I'm not saying you're wrong," he said quickly. "Just that there might be a..." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Sean, this isn't a spreadsheet. People don't move in clean lines when they're hungry and half drunk." "I know that too," he said. "I just trust me. 10 minutes. If it doesn't work, we go back." She studied his face, searching for arrogance and finding something else. Earnestness, maybe, or stubborn hope. She exhaled sharply. 10 minutes. "Thank you." "This is not a thank you moment," she said. "This is a don't make me regret this moment." They gathered the runners, 3 college kids with impressive balance and questionable attention spans. Sean explained the change as simply as he could, drawing a loop in the air with his finger. "Clockwise," one of them said. "Like NASCAR." "Exactly," Sean said, relieved. The change went live at 7:18 p.m. At 7:23, someone dropped a tray. At 7:24, a server collided with a runner near the bar's edge. At 7:25, the kitchen printer began screaming like a distressed animal. Sean felt the heat crawl up his neck. "Abort," Lena said flatly. "Abort now." Okay," Sean said. Everyone back to original flow. Took another 5 minutes for the system to settle, but the damage was done. Orders were delayed. Tempers flared. The music kept playing, blissfully unaware. Lena finished salvaging the situation with practiced calm, then turned to Sean. "Outside," she said. They stepped onto the sand, the torches casting long shadows. The ocean rolled in, steady and indifferent. "That was a disaster," she said. "Yes," Sean said. "It was." "You don't test during peak," she said. "Ever." "I know," he said. "I wasn't thinking." "No," she said. "You were thinking too much." He nodded, jaw tight. "I'm sorry." She crossed her arms. "You didn't break anything permanent. But you shook people. They trust patterns. I didn't mean to undermine that." "I know," she said, surprising him. "You want to help. That's obvious." He looked at her. "Then why does it feel like I'm constantly in the way?" "Because you're trying to fix something that isn't broken," she said. "This place works because it breathes. You try to optimize breathing, you suffocate it." He stared out at the water. "My whole career was built on fixing things that weren't technically broken. Were they actually better after?" He hesitated. "More efficient." "That's not an answer." "No," he said quietly. "It's not." They stood in silence for a moment, the drums carrying faintly from inside. "Look," Lena said finally. "I don't hate ideas. I hate ideas that ignore reality." "I don't want to ignore it," Sean said. "I want to understand it." "Then stop leading," she said. "Start listening." He nodded. "Okay." She studied him again, then sighed. "Come on. You can help with the drink station. And no changes." "Yes, ma'am." She snorted despite herself. The rest of the night passed without incident. Sean stayed firmly in support mode, fetching, carrying, observing. He watched how Lena anticipated needs without asking, how she read the room like a language. He noticed the small things, how she adjusted the music when the crowd shifted, how she redirected a frustrated customer with humor instead of defensiveness. By the time the last table cleared, the moon was high and the sand cool beneath their feet. They leaned against the bar, exhaustion settling in. "You okay?" Lena asked. "Embarrassed," he said. "But okay." "Good," she said. "Embarrassment means you care." He smiled faintly. "You're not wrong." She took a sip of water. "You're not useless, you know?" "High praise," he said again. "Different context," she said. "You just need to learn where you fit." He looked at her, really looked. "Where do you fit?" She shrugged. "Here. For now." "That sounds temporary." "Everything is," she said. "Some of us just don't pretend otherwise." The music had faded to background hum. The ocean whispered its endless conversation. Sean felt something shift. Not a solution, not a plan. Just a quiet understanding that this place didn't need to be fixed. It needed to be respected. And maybe, just maybe, so did he. Chapter 4, the night the power goes out, the lights died at 8:41 p.m. Not flickered. Not dimmed. Died. 1 second the club was glowing. Torches flaring, bar lights warm and golden. The ocean reflecting everything back in soft ripples. And the next it was swallowed by darkness and the collective intake of breath from 200 people who had not been consulted about this development. For half a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the generator coughed. It did not come back on. A woman near the bar laughed nervously. Someone else whooped, assuming this was part of the ambience. A chair scraped. Glass clinked. Sean felt his body snap into a familiar, unwanted gear. Incident response. He was already moving before he consciously decided to. Scanning exits, counting torches, calculating how long before confusion tipped into frustration. Okay, he said, louder than he meant to. Everyone stay calm. Sean? Lena's voice cut through the dark, calm and sharp as a bell. Stop. He did. She was a silhouette beside him, her outline lit by torchlight and moon. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush. She just took control. Mike, she called. Check the breaker by the storage shed. On it, came the reply, already moving. Jules, she said. Candles from the back. Every table. I've got them. She turned slightly, addressing the room now, her voice carrying without effort. Hey everyone. We've got a temporary power issue. Torches are staying lit, bar is still open. And if you can hear me, you're doing great. Laughter rippled through the crowd, easing the tension. Sean exhaled. He hadn't even realized he was holding his breath. He leaned closer to her. Generator. Storm earlier, she said. It's been touchy all week. Do we shut down service? No, she said immediately. We pivot. Of course they did. Within minutes, candles glowed on tables, turning the darkness intimate instead of alarming. Someone, Sean wasn't sure who, started clapping to a rhythm. The steel drum players, who had been mid-break, picked it up instinctively, tapping softly at first, then louder, acoustic and raw. The crowd leaned in. This is, Sean said quietly. Magic, Lena finished. This is what I mean. He watched it happen, awe creeping in where anxiety had been. Drinks were poured by torchlight. Servers navigated by memory and instinct. Conversations deepened. Phones stayed mostly in pockets, useless in the dark. Sean found himself at the bar with Lena, both of them moving in sync now, no words needed. When she reached for ice, he already had it. When she needed limes, he slid them across. At one point, their hands brushed. Neither of them commented. The music shifted, slower, layered with laughter and the hush of waves. Someone started singing, off-key but earnest, and instead of being drowned out, the crowd joined in. Sean felt something in his chest loosen. The last tight knot of resistance he hadn't known was still there. See, Lena said, handing a drink to a customer. People don't come here for perfection. He nodded. They come for this. She glanced at him, surprised by how quickly he'd said it. Yeah. An hour later, the power was still out, the generator stubborn and silent. No one had left. In fact, more people had arrived, drawn by the sound of something unexpected happening. Tessa appeared beside them, eyes bright. If this turns into a regular thing, I'm blaming both of you. Lena grinned. You're welcome. When the night finally began to wind down, the moon was high and the torches burned low. The crowd drifted away reluctantly, like no one wanted to be the first to break the spell. Sean helped stack chairs, his muscles aching in a way that felt earned. You didn't freak out, Lena said, wiping down the bar. I wanted to, he admitted. Deeply. But you didn't. Because you told me to stop. She smiled faintly. Good listening. They worked in companionable silence for a while. The ocean hummed its endless song. So, Lena said eventually, why'd you really leave your job? He paused, cloth in hand. I hated my life. She didn't react, just waited. I thought it was the stress, he continued, the hours. But really, it was that I kept postponing myself. I was always going to live later. Turns out later has terrible availability. She considered that. What were you postponing? Everything, he said. Friends, love, sleep, joy. I was good at my job. People kept telling me I was lucky. And I felt like I was disappearing. She leaned against the bar, studying him in the low light. You don't seem like someone who disappears easily. I'm very efficient, he said dryly. She laughed, then sobered. I stayed here because it's real. It's messy and exhausting, and sometimes it's all I can do not to quit mid-shift. But it's honest. I think I'm afraid I won't know who I am without the structure, he said. She shrugged. Structure's overrated. Rhythm matters more. He smiled at that. You're full of inconvenient wisdom. Years of practice. They finished cleaning. The beach was quiet now, the club dim and peaceful. Sean hesitated, then said, thank you, for tonight, for not letting me turn it into an emergency. She looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. You didn't need saving. You just needed to get out of your own way. Working on it. She nodded. I can tell. They stood there for a moment longer, the space between them charged but unspoken. Same time tomorrow? He asked lightly. She smirked. We'll see. As she walked away, Sean watched her go. The sand cool beneath his feet, the ocean stretching endless and dark and full of promise. For the first time since he'd quit, he didn't wonder if he'd made a mistake. He wondered what else he'd been missing. Chapter 5 Old Ghosts, New Lines. The email found Sean at 6:12 a.m., which felt personal. He stared at his phone from the edge of the guest bed in his parents' house, the ceiling fan clicking softly overhead, Florida sunlight already pressing through the blinds like it had somewhere to be. Subject: quick catch-up? He didn't open it right away. He knew who it was from. He could tell by the careful neutrality of the subject line, the kind designed to look casual while carrying weight. He set the phone down, ran a hand through his hair, and tried to breathe without letting his chest tighten. Eventually, he opened it. It was his former director. Friendly, complimentary, full of phrases like exciting opportunity and unique fit. It referenced his recent change without naming it, as if quitting his job had been a weather event instead of a choice. They wanted him back. Not exactly back, but adjacent. Consulting. Short-term. Well-paid. Remote-friendly. Tied, coincidentally, to hospitality expansion and operational scaling. Sean laughed once, quietly. The universe had a sense of humor. By the time he arrived at the club later that morning, the email sat unanswered but heavy in his pocket like a stone. The place was quieter during the day, stripped back to sun-bleached wood and the soft hiss of waves. A few staff moved lazily, resetting for the evening. Lena was at one of the beachside tables, laptop open, iced coffee sweating beside her. Sean slowed without meaning to. She looked different out of the nighttime chaos. Softer, maybe, but more focused. She wore cutoffs and an oversized button-down, sleeves rolled, hair loose around her shoulders. She was frowning at the screen like it had personally offended her. Morning, he said. She glanced up. You're early. Couldn't sleep. Let me guess, she said. Too much joy. Something like that. He gestured at the laptop. What's that? Event proposals, she said. Private bookings. Theme nights. Things people want but don't want to plan themselves. That's a lot. She shrugged. It's part of the job. Is it? He asked. Or is it something you just absorbed because no one else did? Her fingers paused over the keyboard. She looked at him, expression unreadable. You always ask questions like that? Only when I'm trying not to repeat old mistakes. She studied him for a moment, then closed the laptop halfway. You want to help? Yes. Then don't reorganize anything, she said. Just read. She slid the laptop toward him. They spent the next hour reviewing proposals together. Sean resisted every instinct to optimize, to streamline, to suggest immediate changes. Instead, he asked questions, real ones. Why this event worked? Why that one didn't? Lena explained, gesturing toward the beach, the bar, the space between tables. You can't promise exclusivity and still let the tide decide how much sand people get in their shoes, she said. People get weird about sand. That's fair. At some point, Tessa joined them, iced tea in hand. She leaned against the table, watching them with open amusement. Well, she said, this is new. What is? Lena asked. You two not arguing. Sean smiled. Give it time. Tessa laughed. Careful. I might start assigning you joint projects. Lena shot Sean a look. Don't you dare encourage her. But Sean noticed she didn't sound entirely opposed. Later that afternoon, Tessa pulled Sean aside near the bar. You okay? She asked. Define okay. She gave him a look that said she'd raised at least one adult human and wasn't impressed by evasiveness. He sighed. I got an email. Of course you did. He blinked. You didn't even ask from who. I don't need to, she said. Your ghosts don't travel light. He smiled faintly. They want me back, sort of. And it's tempting, he admitted. Not because I want the job, but because it's familiar. And familiar is seductive. Tessa nodded. So is misery. Keeps the same hours every day. He huffed. You make it sound so romantic. She softened. Listen to me, Sean. Wanting security doesn't mean you're weak. But don't confuse comfort with happiness. I won't. You already are, she said gently. But that's okay. Just don't make decisions in secret. That landed heavier than she probably intended. That night, the club buzzed with a low, steady energy. No blackout. No surprises. Just music, laughter, and the quiet competence of people who knew what they were doing. Sean worked beside Lena again, the easy rhythm between them now familiar enough to feel dangerous. At one point, she handed him a drink without looking. Thanks, he said. You didn't order that. I know, she said. You needed it. He smiled, then hesitated. Can I ask you something? She glanced at him. Depends. Why are you here? He asked. I mean, not just here. Here. She stiffened, just slightly. He noticed. Loaded question, she said. I'm learning to ask those. She finished wiping down the bar before answering. I had plans once. Big ones. Events in Miami, New York. The kind of life that needs heels and a 5-year calendar. And my mom got sick, she said simply. Then better. Then sick again. Plans have terrible timing. I'm sorry, he said. She shrugged. It was a long time ago. Still counts. She met his gaze. I stayed because this place let me breathe. And then staying became habit. He nodded. Habits are powerful. Careful, she said. You're projecting again. Occupational hazard. The music shifted. A slow song. Couples moved closer. Sean felt the moment stretch, the air between them charged with things not yet said. I like you, Lena said suddenly. Just so we're clear. His heart kicked. I like you too. But, she continued, holding up a finger, I don't want to be your Florida phase, or your recovery project. I wouldn't. I know, she said. I just need you to know what line not to cross. He swallowed. That's fair. Good, she said softer now. Because I don't half-step anymore. Neither did he. Or at least he didn't want to. Later, alone on the beach, Sean pulled out his phone. He reread the email, then started a reply. He typed, deleted, retyped. He didn't send it. Instead, he looked back at the club, the lights, the music, the people moving together in imperfect harmony. For the first time, the old life didn't feel like an inevitability. Felt like a choice. And choices, he was learning, came with lines you couldn't uncross without losing something that mattered. Chapter 6. The almost. Sean did not answer the email. That, in itself, began to feel like an answer. 3 days passed, then 4. The message stayed unread in his drafts, a half-formed reply hovering like a ghost that refused to leave the room. Every morning he told himself he'd deal with it later. Every night he found a new reason not to. Later, it turned out, was a moving target. The club was busy in a steady, predictable way. No blackouts, no storms, no emergencies that demanded heroics. Sean settled into a rhythm that surprised him. He arrived early, stayed late, learned names, learned habits. He stopped carrying the legal pad. He started trusting his body to remember where things were. Lena noticed. You're less square, she told him one afternoon, watching him help reset tables without being asked. I'll take that as a compliment. You should, she said. It's a hard-earned downgrade. They were good together now. Not just efficient, but easy. The banter softened into something warmer, threaded with glances that lingered a beat too long, with silences that felt deliberate instead of awkward. Sean was aware of it constantly. He was also aware, painfully, that he hadn't told her about the email. That omission sat between them like a fault line. The night it finally came to a head was unremarkable by any outside measure. A Thursday, a decent crowd, the kind of night that slipped by unnoticed unless you were paying attention. Sean was behind the bar with Lena, both of them moving in practiced harmony. At some point, she leaned in close to say something about a customer, her shoulder brushing his arm. Electricity sparked, sharp and undeniable. They both froze. For a moment, neither of them moved. The noise of the club faded to background hum. Sean became acutely aware of the space between them, of how easily he could close it. He didn't. Lena pulled back first, searching his face. What's going on with you? She asked quietly. What do you mean? You've been here, she said, tapping the bar lightly. But you haven't been here. He opened his mouth to deflect, then stopped. The old instincts flared, minimize, redirect, delay. He recognized them now for what they were. Avoidance dressed up as caution. There's something I haven't told you, he said. Her expression shifted, guarded but attentive. Okay, he swallowed. I got an offer. From my old job. Well, adjacent. Consulting. She didn't react right away. When? A week ago. And you didn't mention it. No. Why? Because I didn't want it to change anything, he said. And because I didn't know what I was going to do. She studied him for a long moment. That's not the same thing as not knowing what you want. He nodded slowly. I know. They worked in silence for a few minutes, the unspoken conversation heavy between them. Finally, Lena set down a glass and turned to face him fully. Sean, she said. I meant what I said the other night. I don't half-step. I'm not, he said quickly. Are you sure? She asked. Because keeping options open is still an option. That landed hard. I'm scared, he admitted. Not of the job, of the possibility that this, he gestured around them, then between them, is temporary. That if I choose it fully, it might still not last. And if you don't choose it, she said evenly, it definitely won't. He had no argument for that. The night wound down around them. Chairs stacked. Music faded. The beach emptied until only the sound of waves remained. They finished cleaning in a quiet that felt fragile. Walk with me, Lena said when they were done. They stepped onto the sand, the air cool and salt heavy. The moon was high, painting the water silver. They walked without speaking for a while, footprints trailing behind them, quickly erased by the tide. This is where I usually come to think, she said finally. When I need to remember why I stay. And do you? He asked. Most days, she said. Some days I wonder if I'm just afraid to leave. He nodded. Fears persuasive. They stopped near the water's edge. Lena turned to him, her face serious. I like you, she said again. Enough to risk being wrong about you. His chest tightened. I don't want to be wrong. Then don't make me wait while you figure out if you're brave enough to want this. He stepped closer without thinking. Drawn by gravity he didn't fully understand. The space between them vanished. Her breath caught, just slightly. For a heartbeat it felt inevitable. Sean lifted a hand, stopping just short of touching her face. I can't, he said, voice rough. Not yet. The disappointment flashed across her expression before she could hide it. She took a step back, creating distance where there had been none. Thank you for being honest, she said quietly. I wish you'd been faster. I'm working on it, he said. I know, she said. But I'm not a practice run. She turned and started back toward the club. Lena, he called. She stopped but didn't turn. I'm not choosing the job, he said. I just need to choose myself first. She looked over her shoulder then, eyes searching his. Make sure you don't confuse the two, she said. Then she walked away. Sean stayed where he was, the waves lapping at his feet, the night pressing in around him. He almost lingered, sharp and unresolved. For the first time since he'd quit, the fear wasn't about going back. It was about losing what he hadn't fully claimed yet. And that somehow felt like progress. Chapter 7, The Storm Weekend. The storm announced itself politely, at first. A line of bruised clouds on the horizon. A breeze that shifted just enough to make the torches lean. The kind of weather that invited speculation instead of concern. By noon, speculation had turned into argument. We should cancel, Mike said, squinting at his phone. Radar looks bad. We should wait, Tessa countered. Storms flirt all the time. Doesn't mean they commit. Lena stood with her arms crossed, watching the sky rather than the people. Sean noticed that how she trusted patterns outside more than opinions inside. What do you think? Tessa asked Sean. The question landed heavier than it should have. 3 weeks ago, he would have launched into probabilities, liability exposure, contingency planning. He would have framed the answer in confidence intervals and worst-case scenarios. Now he watched the clouds roll in, felt the air press down, listened to the ocean deepen its voice. I think, he said slowly, we prepare like it's happening and decide like it might not. Lena looked at him then, not surprised, curious. Tessa nodded once. Good answer. The storm was forecast to peak that evening, right in the middle of the club's biggest weekend event of the season. A private booking, high-end, the kind of crowd that expected everything to go exactly as planned. By 4 o'clock, the wind had picked up. By 5, the sky had darkened to a slate gray that felt deliberate. Okay, Lena said, clapping her hands once. Plan B becomes Plan A. Sean, you're on guest communication with me. Tessa, inventory lock. Everyone else, secure anything that can become airborne and ruin our lives. Sean moved without thinking, falling into step beside Lena as they approached the first table of early arrivals. She handled the tone, warm, confident, unflappable. He filled in details, what would change, what wouldn't, how they'd keep people safe and fed and entertained. They worked well together. Too well, maybe. The tension between them hadn't disappeared. It had compressed, like something waiting for pressure to release it. By 7, the storm hit for real. Rain lashed sideways. Wind tore through the palms with a sound like fabric ripping. The ocean surged, aggressive and loud, erasing the line between spectacle and threat. Inside, the club shifted. Outdoor seating was cleared. Guests were moved inward, packed closer together. The space suddenly intimate and buzzing with nervous energy. The power flickered. Sean felt the old reflex surge, adrenaline sharp and commanding. He caught it this time, shaped it instead of letting it run him. Generators holding, Mike shouted over the wind. For now, Lena said. Sean, help me keep people calm. They moved through the crowd, checking in, redirecting, offering drinks and reassurance in equal measure. Sean noticed how Lena modulated her presence. Light jokes here, firm authority there. He matched her, learned from her in real time. A woman grabbed his arm near the bar. Is it safe? Yes, he said, meeting her gaze steadily. And if that changes, we'll tell you immediately. She nodded, reassured not by the words but by the way he said them. The power went out at 8:17. This time the generator kicked in, mostly. Lights dimmed but stayed on. Music faltered, then resumed, slower, heavier. A server slipped near the entrance. Sean was there before she hit the ground, steadying her. I'm okay, she said breathlessly. Good, he said. Sit for a minute anyway. Outside, the storm held. Inside, something else took hold. A collective awareness that they were all riding this out together. Lena leaned close to him near the bar. You're doing great. So are you. She held his gaze a beat too long, then pulled back. Don't get sentimental in a crisis. Wouldn't dream of it. At 9, a loud crack split the air. A palm tree at the edge of the property had lost a limb, the broken fronds slamming down near the storage shed. Everyone froze. Sean didn't. Okay, he said, voice carrying without shouting. We're closing the beachside completely. No one goes out there. Tessa, can we reroute staff through the back corridor? Already on it, she called. Lena watched him for a second, something shifting in her expression. Approval, yes, but also recognition. He wasn't performing. He wasn't proving anything. He was present. The storm peaked around 10. Rain hammered the roof. The ocean roared. The club held, battered but unbroken. When it finally began to ease, the relief was palpable. People laughed, clapped, toasted survival like it had been a shared adventure instead of a near miss. Cleanup took hours. By the time the last guest left, it was nearly 2 in the morning. The storm had passed, leaving the world scrubbed raw and quiet. Sean and Lena stood near the bar, soaked and exhausted, the space around them stripped down to aftermath. You okay? She asked. He nodded. Yeah. You? Yeah, she said. Tired. Wired. They stepped outside together. The beach was a mess, debris scattered, sand reshaped by the tide. The moon broke through the clouds, silver and forgiving. They stood in silence for a moment. You didn't try to take over, Lena said finally. I wanted to help, he said. Not control. That's new. For me too. She turned to face him fully now. So what happens next, Sean? He didn't dodge it this time. I turned down the consulting offer, he said. Her breath caught just slightly. When? Tonight, he said. During the storm, actually. Between checking the generator and moving chairs. She searched his face. And I realized I wasn't choosing between jobs, he said. I was choosing how I show up. I don't want to keep one foot out the door anymore. Silence stretched between them, fragile and full. And what does that mean for us? She asked quietly. It means, he said, stepping closer, that I want this, not as an escape, not as a phase, as something I choose knowing it could still go wrong. She studied him, the moonlight catching the edges of her expression. You're late, she said softly. I know, but you're here. Yes. She closed the distance between them then, resting her forehead briefly against his chest, breathing him in. Okay, she said, but we go slow. He smiled, relief and warmth flooding through him. I'm done rushing. She pulled back just enough to look up at him. We'll see. He laughed quietly. Fair. They stood together on the reshaped beach, the club behind them still standing, the storm a memory already fading. Sean felt it settle in his bones. Not triumph, not certainty. Belonging. And this time he wasn't afraid to stay. Chapter 8. The Choice. The morning after the storm felt strangely new, like the world had been reset while everyone slept. Sean woke early, not because of anxiety or obligation, but because his body had learned a different rhythm. He lay there for a moment, listening to the house breathe, the ceiling fan's soft click, the muffled clatter of his parents already inhabiting separate conversations in the kitchen. He smiled and got up. At the club, the damage assessment was mercifully brief. A downed palm limb, scattered debris, sand where sand had no business being. Nothing structural, nothing permanent, the kind of mess that responded to effort. Tessa stood barefoot in the sand, coffee in hand, surveying the aftermath with an expression that hovered between pride and exhaustion. We survived, she said. We did, Sean agreed. And you didn't turn it into a flowchart, she added. Growth, he said solemnly. She laughed. Walk with me. They moved along the edge of the deck, stepping around fronds and overturned chairs. Staff trickled in, exchanging tired jokes, already slipping back into the work of restoring order. You did good last night, Tessa said. Not because you were calm, because you were human. Sean considered that. I think I finally understood the difference. She stopped and looked at him. There's something else, isn't there? He nodded. I turned down the consulting offer. Her eyebrows lifted. Just like that. No, he said honestly. More like with my hands shaking and a draft email I rewrote 7 times. She smiled softly. Even better. But, he continued, that doesn't answer the bigger question. And what's that? What I'm building toward, he said. I don't want to drift into this life the way I drifted into the last one. I want to choose it deliberately. Tessa studied him, then nodded. Good. So choose. The word echoed in his chest long after she walked away. By late afternoon, the club had been restored to something resembling normal. The storm weekend was already turning into legend, embellished with every retelling. Lena arrived just before sunset. Sean saw her from across the deck and felt the familiar pull, warm, steady, no longer frantic. She wore jeans and a light sweater, hair loose, eyes alert. She paused when she spotted him, something cautious flickering across her face. They hadn't spoken much since the storm. Not avoidance exactly, just space. Hey, he said, approaching. Hey, she replied. They stood there, the ocean filling the silence between them. Walk? He asked. She nodded. They headed down the beach, away from the club, away from witnesses. The sand was cool now, the tide gentle, the sky streaked with fading gold and purple. I meant what I said, Sean began. About choosing how I show up. I know, she said. I believe you. But believing isn't the same as knowing, he said. And I don't want you to have to gamble on me. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Sean, I'm not asking for guarantees. I'm asking for honesty and presence. Everything else is noise. He took that in. Okay, then here's the truth. He told her about the moment during the storm when he realized his old instincts no longer fit. About how leadership didn't feel like control anymore. About how staying, really staying, felt scarier than leaving ever had. I'm not afraid of failing here, he said. I'm afraid of succeeding and still feeling empty. And I don't think that's going to happen. Not if I'm doing this right. She watched him carefully. And doing it right means? Building something sustainable, he said. For Tessa. For the staff. For me. I want to help grow the club in ways that protect what makes it work. Slowly. With consent. She smiled faintly. You sound like you're pitching a relationship. Maybe I am. She laughed quietly, then sobered. And where does that leave us? He stepped closer, stopping just short of crowding her. It leaves us here. Together. Taking it one step at a time. No escape hatches. She searched his face, looking for hesitation, for the familiar signs of retreat. She didn't find them. Okay, she said. But I get to call you out if you start drifting. I'd expect nothing less. They stood there, the decision settling between them. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just solid. That night, the club opened again. Softer than usual. The energy still tender after the storm. Sean worked alongside Lena. Their movements easy. Their glances unguarded. At one point, she leaned in and said quietly, You know this means you're really here now. I know. No more pretending. Done with pretending. Later, after closing, they sat on the deck with their feet in the sand, sharing a bottle of something cold and uncomplicated. I used to think choosing meant closing doors, Sean said. Now it feels more like standing still long enough to see which ones were never meant for me. Lena rested her head against his shoulder. Standing still is underrated. He wrapped an arm around her, feeling the simple rightness of it. The ocean rolled in, steady and patient. Sean didn't know exactly what the future looked like. He didn't have a 5-year plan or a polished vision statement. What he had was this moment, this place, and the quiet confidence that for once, he wasn't running ahead of his life. He was living it. Chapter 9. Steel drums at sunrise. The steel drums started before the sun did. Sean heard them from the parking lot. A low, familiar rhythm carried on the early morning air, softer than the nighttime pulse but just as sure. He paused with his keys in his hand, listening, letting the sound settle into him the way it always did, like a reminder that things could be both structured and loose at the same time. When he stepped onto the sand, the beach looked different in the pale pre-dawn light. The mess from the storm was gone, cleaned and coaxed back into place by hands that knew how to restore without erasing. The ocean was calm, almost gentle, its surface catching the first hints of pink and gold. Lena stood near the edge of the deck, barefoot, hair pulled back, a mug cradled in her hands. One of the musicians tapped out a quiet rhythm nearby, practicing without an audience. She turned when she sensed him, a smile already forming. You're early. So are you. Couldn't sleep, she said. I like seeing the place before it wakes up. Sean joined her, the sand cool under his feet. It feels honest, he said. Like it hasn't decided what it's going to be yet. She laughed softly. You're getting philosophical again. Occupational hazard, he said. New occupation. She glanced at him sideways. And how's that going? Being here. He thought about it. About the past weeks. The mistakes, the storms literal and otherwise. The way his days now ended with salt on his skin instead of fluorescent lights in his eyes. It's harder than my old job, he said. And somehow easier. She nodded. That tracks. They watched the horizon together as the sun edged upward. Slow and deliberate. The drummer picked up the tempo slightly, filling the quiet with something warm and expectant. Tessa's idea, Lena said, nodding toward the musician. Sunrise sets once a week. Locals only. No marketing. No big announcements. Sean smiled. Of course it was. She says it reminds people why they live here. And does it? Lena leaned her shoulder into his. Yeah, it does. Footsteps approached behind them. Tessa appeared, coffee in one hand, clipboard conspicuously absent. Well, she said, if this isn't domestic. Sean groaned. Please don't narrate. I will absolutely narrate, Tessa said. It's my favorite genre. She took in the scene. The ocean, the music, the two of them standing comfortably close, and her expression softened. You look settled, kid. Sean met her gaze. I feel present. Careful, she said lightly. That's how it starts. They shared a smile, unspoken understanding passing between them. Later that morning, the club opened quietly. No rush, no spectacle. Just coffee, pastries, and a handful of regulars who drifted in like they belonged there because they did. Sean worked the floor with ease now, greeting people by name, moving without hesitation. He noticed the small things. Which table caught the breeze just right, which server needed backup before asking, when the music should fade instead of swell. At one point, Lena caught him watching the room with a thoughtful expression. "What?" she asked. "I was thinking about a few ideas," he said carefully. She raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "For later," he added quickly. "And only if you want. Stuff that protects this. Not changes it." She considered him, then nodded. "We'll talk." It wasn't permission. It was partnership. By mid-morning, Sean's parents arrived, moving through the space in their familiar overlapping way. "Did you eat?" his mother asked. "Your aunt says you're very helpful," his father said at the same time. "Coffee?" his mother added. "We're proud of you," his father continued, nodding firmly. Sean answered all of it without missing a beat. "Yes, no, thank you, and I'm glad you're here." They beamed at him, pleased and none the wiser. Lena watched the exchange with open amusement. "You're impressive," she said. That was like conversational jazz. Years of training. When the crowd thinned and the heat of the day began to settle in, Sean and Lena found themselves back on the deck, the ocean stretching endless and familiar before them. "So," she said, "what's next for you?" He didn't hesitate. "This, learning, helping without taking over, being part of something that matters to people. And personally," he turned to face her fully, "I want to build a life that doesn't require escape hatches." She studied him, the weight of the words landing where they needed to. "You know that doesn't mean everything stays the same forever." "I know," he said. "It just means I stop running before it gets hard." She smiled, slow and real. "Good answer." The drummer began another soft rhythm as the sun climbed higher, the music threading through the morning like a promise. Sean reached for Lena's hand, tentative but sure. She took it without hesitation, her fingers warm and steady in his. They stood there together, watching the club breathe, the beach wake, the day unfold without urgency. For the first time in his adult life, Sean didn't feel like he was behind. He felt exactly where he was meant to be, on sand that shifted but held, under a sky that made room for change, with a future that wasn't mapped out but chosen, one honest step at a time. The steel drums carried on, bright and hopeful, as the sun rose fully over the water, and Sean stayed,